Welcome back to another Baha'i Explorations. This series, The Life of Martha Root with Violetta Zane. Violetta, we greatly appreciate this effort, and I'm going to just read your brief. Violetta Zane is an artist and graphic designer living in Point Noir. She is also a researcher, writer, and presenter specializing in Baha'i history and has given over 150 talks on our YouTube channel and other channels. The Life of Martha Root will be Violetta's 7th series with the Clearwater Baha'is YouTube channel after the lives of Baha'u'llah, the Bab, Abdu'l-Baha, Shoghi Effendi, and the Greatest Holy Leaf. Her new website, Baha'iChronologies.com, is where you can find all of her work in both English and French. Thank you very much, Violetta, for this. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Okay. All right. Welcome, friends. This is the Life of Martha Root, Part 8, Consecration, 1937 to 1939. I think we need to mute the participants. Chapter 1, Home for the Last Time. The Committee of Three. In July 1936, as Martha was in Norway and getting ready to return home, The Guardian sent a cable to the National Spiritual Assembly of the United States and Canada, ensuring that they would be at the docks on July 27th to welcome home Martha Root after her 4.5-year absence. Beloved, indefatigable Martha, sailing New York Berengsfjord, that's the name of the ship. Feel certain believers will accord befitting welcome, well-beloved star servant of Baha'u'llah. This is the National Spiritual Assembly of the United States and Canada in 1935-1936. Martha's health had been so poor the last 2 years after several falls and an almost fatal illness in Norway that Shoghi Effendi asked the National Spiritual Assembly of the United States and Canada to appoint a special committee to protect Martha from herself. The Guardian knew that only a directive from an institution could get Martha Root to stop and rest. The National Spiritual Assembly appointed 3 of Martha's closest friends to the committee: Roy Wilhelm, Mountford Mills, and Horace Hawley. They knew Martha's tendency to overextend herself in service to the faith, neglect her health, forget to eat, forget to rest. And they, as the committee, took their job very seriously of protecting Martha. Martha called them affectionately the Committee of Three. The Committee of Three were adamant that Martha would travel straight from the East Coast to the West Coast and not lecture and not visit cities. Martha had to rest. But for Martha Root to rest, to stop while she was still standing, was absolutely excruciating. It was torture for her, but Martha obeyed for 10 months. Departure. On May 20th, 1937, after 10 months in the United States, Martha's 17 pieces of luggage and 6 large packages of books and pamphlets were sent to the Tatsuta Maru at the dock in San Francisco. It was a different Martha who was leaving her native land for the last time. Her hair was white. She now wore glasses. She needed a cane to walk. But she still had those luminous blue-green eyes, which, as Mabel Garris so beautifully says in Lioness at the Threshold, startled people with their depth and brilliance. Martha gave a rose to each of her 50 friends and anointed them with perfume. She breathed the gentle Alawapha and gave them each a farewell kiss. Joyce Dahl was at the docks that day and later said, "It was truly the departure of a queen. Martha made it a spiritual occasion of lasting effect. Her consecration to the faith was the power which melted the barriers on her way." From a distance, Martha's friends saw her speaking to a Japanese lady. Everyone knew she was already teaching the faith. She had started her last great teaching journey while her ship was still at port. The Tatsutamaru lifted anchor, pulled away from the pier. The loud whistles rang out through the air, and Martha Root was off for the last time, with only open seas ahead of her. She was free again. Chapter 2, Bombs and Earthquakes. China. After a brief but productive visit to Tokyo, Kyoto, Kobe, and Osaka, and this is Martha in Japan in 1937, Martha arrived in China in June, July 1937 at a time of profound tensions between China and Japan. Japanese and Chinese troops were about to clash, and within a few days, the local conflict would escalate to a full, though undeclared, war. This is a photograph of Martha in China in a rickshaw with children around her in 1937. This is another photograph of Martha with the English Literary Society in Beijing in 1937. And this is a photograph of Martha with the Uskulis in Shanghai. This is one of my favorite pictures of Martha. It's a beautiful portrait of her, dressed in white as usual, taken by Mirza Hussein R. Tuti at his home in Shanghai on July 1st, 1937. Now, every photograph in the rest of this section in China is from the 14th August 1937 Bloody Saturday bombing of Shanghai, and they are all from this amazing collection called the John Montgomery Collection at the website Historical Photographs of China. Martha worked from home until August 8th, 1937, when 50,000 Chinese entered the Shanghai International Settlement, fleeing the city. Then a few days later, Bloody Saturday happened. The 14th of August, 1937, Shanghai bombing was absolute hell, and Martha described it in detail. The air raids came over the Shanghai International Settlement. The whirring, staccato, louder and louder over our heads. Then a silence, then the horror, the shock, the shaking house, and the awful explosions of bursting bombs. It was hell upon earth. Martha had never seen people more panicked. That night, she slept with her clothes on. The morning paper reported that 1,200 people had been killed by bombs the day before. 14th of August, 1937 would be known as Bloody Saturday. Martha escaped from Shanghai on the President Jefferson on August 17th, 1937. The Philippines. When the ship docked in Manila, Martha was the first to disembark, eager to mail in her articles on the Shanghai air raids as soon as possible. Now, I could not find any photos of the 1937 Luzon earthquake, so the photos in this section are from other earthquakes in the 1930s. Martha was making her way in the customs office in Manila when the earth began to shake. Martha had left Bloody Saturday in Shanghai and traded air raids for a 7.4 magnitude earthquake. It was one of the worst earthquakes in the history of the Philippines, and it was a terrifying experience. Martha recorded her impressions. Suddenly, the ground began to shake violently and move up back towards our faces. We tried to run forward, but we were far from the exit. People were stampeding, rushing, crushing. Then the lights all went out. At the time, I thought the crowds are crushing us. The earth will swallow us. The whole building is crushing down on us. I thought it was death. After the bombings in Shanghai and the earthquake in the Philippines, Martha had nowhere left to go but India. The Guardian's cable. A month and a half before Martha arrived in Mumbai, the Guardian had already laid the foundations of her immensely successful stay on the Indian subcontinent with a short cable he sent to the National Spiritual Assembly of India and Burma. You see how he sent a cable to America before her arrival and a cable to India before her arrival. The Guardian was following her activities very closely and was assisting her very directly. This is a photograph of the National Spiritual Assembly of India and Burma in 1935-1936. Martha Root arriving Bombay September 16th, urge individuals, local national assemblies vigorously participate, ensure triumphant success her extended stay, accord magnificent welcome, best beloved, star servant Baha'u'llah Shogi. This is the same phrasing as for the cable he sent to the American National Spiritual Assembly. Star Servant Baha'u'llah. Chapter 3, Martha's Tour of the Indian Subcontinent. India and Myanmar, Burma at the time, were places of firsts. Myanmar had one of the first functioning Baha'i communities in the world outside of Persia. They were so advanced that it was to them Abdu'l-Baha turned in 1897 when he needed a sublime carved marble sarcophagus to reinter the remains of the Bab. This is a photograph of the completed sarcophagus in the center under the awning in Rangoon before it was sent to Abdu'l-Baha. India's Baha'i history started within a month of the Bab's declaration. The 9th letter of the living was an Indian man from Lucknow named Saeed Hindi, and the Bab had sent him back to India in July 1844. In 1882, during Baha'u'llah's ministry, Nasiri Press, the world's very first Baha'i printing press, was established in Bombay. They printed the very first edition of the Kitab-i-Khan. And during the ministry of the Guardian in 1923, India was one of the first 3 national spiritual assemblies in the world, along with the national spiritual assemblies of the British Isles and of Germany. And Martha Root's visit in 1937 to 1938 was the first time the Baha'i faith was so highly publicized that the National Spiritual Assembly of India and Burma later said Martha had opened India to the faith. These are all of the cities that she visited in the 4 countries that she went to. Martha's 15-month tour of the Indian subcontinent is universally acknowledged by her biographers to have been her best work, and Martha felt the same. But why exactly? Why? Because Martha had been traveling and teaching for 22 years. She had achieved incredible feats. She had opened the continent of South America to the faith single-handedly. She had toured German, American, and Chinese universities. But the reason why Martha's work in 1937-1938 was her crowning achievement in terms of her work for the faith was because of perfect institutional collaboration. Up until her arrival in Mumbai in 1937, Martha had been working alone, single-handedly doing all the work, applying for visas, buying tickets, finding hotels, designing her itineraries, contacting venues, approaching newspapers, selling things and writing articles to earn enough money to continue, not to mention feeding herself. In India, all that pressure was off. For 15 months, the National Spiritual Assembly organized her itinerary, booked her travel arrangements, ensured she was always accompanied by very trustworthy Baha'is. The local communities, in turn, arranged for her accommodation, her hospitality, assisted her in any way that she needed. They organized her events, they publicized them, they booked the venues, and they contacted the press. For 15 months, the only 15 months in Martha Root's life of teaching, in 1937 to 1938, in India, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, and Myanmar, all Martha had to do was focus on teaching without a care in the world. And that was why she had done her best work. All the tedious logistics, networking, and planning that had been such a burden on her for 2 decades had been removed from the equation. All Martha had to do was shine. Sri Lanka. Martha briefly stopped in Penang, Malaysia, and then sailed into Colombo, Sri Lanka in mid-September 1937, and she spent a month teaching and resting. Sri Lanka was called Ceylon in 1937, and this beautiful article, Woman Missioner of Universal Peace, Miss Martha Root's First Visit to Ceylon, was published about Martha's first visit to the island paradise. The entire article is on a couple of pages and speaks about the faith, but the opening is very lovely because this is how Martha speaks about Colombo. I love your picturesque city. It is a paradise in beautiful scenery, the charm of the sea, the great graceful palms, the red flowering trees, the exotic gardens, and the always summer climate. I love this because I have never seen this picture of Martha Root before. India. On October 15th, 1937, Martha was welcomed in Mumbai by hundreds of Baha'is, including the National Spiritual Assembly of India and Burma. Martha lectured in Mumbai for 5 days. This is a photograph of her in July 1937. In the front row is Martha Root and Shireen Fosdar. You're going to hear her name a lot. In the back, the handsome gentlemen are, from the left, Isfandiar Bakhtiari, who accompanied Martha constantly. Next to him is Abbas Ali Butt, Mahsul Haq Ilmi, and Rustam Sabet. This is another photograph of Martha in Mumbai with the Baha'i Youth Committee. In Surat, Martha met notables of the town, published several articles, and gave a public lecture. On the 26th of October, 1937, Martha spent 1 day in Pune giving a talk to the local community on teaching before crossing India all the way to the east coast and traveling to Myanmar. Martha arrived in Yangon, Myanmar on the 2nd of November 1937. She spent 8 days in the capital and spoke 6 times to large audiences. Now, everywhere Martha went in India for 15 months, the newspaper coverage was so extensive that everyone in the city heard about the Baha'i faith. Her teaching in Yangon, Rangoon at the time, was so effective that it was reported in all the mainly daily papers, and it created a real stir in the religious circles of the city. Martha even started a children's class and gave the kids their first lesson to memorize excerpts from the writings of Baha'u'llah. On November 10th, 1937, Martha arrived in Mandalay and was welcomed at the train station by her old friend, Syed Mustafa Rumi, who she'd first met in 1915 on her first trip, and now again on her last. Martha spoke to the largest crowd in the history of the faith in Mandalay. Martha was also the first international Baha'i teacher ever to visit and lecture in Tangu. She arrived in Daidanau, a Baha'i village, on November 20th, 1937, and the Baha'is had cleared a special road through the grass from the Rain Road to the beautifully decorated Baha'i Center. At 4 p.m. that afternoon, Martha drove 5 kilometers, 3 miles east to Kungyangun to give a lecture and returned to Daidanau the next day on the 21st of November, had a heavenly dinner with the Baha'is, with every family in the village bringing food to share. This is a photograph of the Baha'is of Daidanau in the 1920s. Then Martha returned to India, arriving at the end of November 1937 in Kolkata, at the time Calcutta, attending two conferences, the Second Indian Cultural Conference and the First Convention of Religions Congress, reading the Guardian's greetings at both events. Martha was the first Baha'i to ever speak in Tiruvananthapuram, where she attended the 9th All India Oriental Conference between 20th and 22nd of December 1937. At all the conferences that Martha attended, she spoke to a wide range of clubs, schools, and groups and maintained contacts with the press, with scholars, and librarians. During her stay in Tiruvananthapuram, Martha had an audience with Sri Chitira Tirunal Balrama Varma, the 26-year-old progressive Maharaja of Travancore, who had enacted the Temple Entry Proclamation in 1936, allowing Hindus of all castes to enter temples. At the time, it was a major social reform in India. In Tiruvananthapuram, Martha also met Dr. James Cousins and Margaret Cousins. Margaret Cousins is the great aunt of Baha'i author Dr. Keith Monroe, who is here with us on Zoom today. The Cousins were friends of Lady Blumfield, and on their way to India, they had met Shoghi Effendi in Haifa. They eventually became significant figures in the Indian independence and women's rights movements. Martha gave 2 lectures in Chennai, which was Madras at the time, and attended the International Theosophical Convention from December 25th, 1937 to January 3rd, 1938. Now, in Chennai, something interesting happened. The first Baha'i literature was published in Telugu. It was the first time, and it wasn't the Baha'is who published it. It was the Brahmo Samaj community, who were very loving and very welcoming to Martha during her whole trip to India. They were a special religious community. And Martha traveled to Sri Lanka, and here are 2 of her very beloved collaborators. I would like to thank Zina and Jamshid, the Fozdar's son and daughter, for their help with this section and for identifying people in photographs for this presentation. On the left, of course, is Shireen Fozdar. In the middle, Martha Root, and on the right, Dr. Khodadad Muncherji Fozdar. Martha gave 4 lectures in Colombo, and the Fozdar traveled with her to Sri Lanka. And on one of the radio interviews that she gave, Shireen Fozdar chanted one of Tahir's poems. Martha remarked that wherever in India she went with Shireen, whenever she chanted poems of Tahir on the radio, people called her the Baha'i Nightingale of India. And many newspaper covers Martha's visit, including a newspaper in Tamil, which is very important that during Martha's visit, many firsts happened, like first article in Tamil about the faith, first Baha'i literature in Telugu. Her visit was deeply important in the history of the faith in India for that time. Now, she returned to India after Sri Lanka, and Martha and Shireen visited Chennai for 6 days in January 1938, where Martha met the press and gave 5 lectures. They both went to Bengaluru, and they gave 3 talks in 3 days, with the audience increasing every day. This is a beautiful portrait of Martha and her great collaborator, Shireen Fozdar. Martha and Shireen spoke twice in Mysuru and in Hyderabad between January 31st and the 4th of February 1938. Martha and Shireen were guests of the state. Martha gave 3 radio interviews and 3 lectures. They returned to Pune, where Martha had just been, and the Baha'is of Pune had publicized Martha's arrival better than anywhere else. Martha gave 4 lectures, and she and Shireen visited the Baha'i school in Pune, which was a very spiritual experience. Arriving in Mumbai in the early morning of 9th of February 1938, Martha found a wonderful surprise. Her luggage that she had abandoned in China had been sent to her from Shanghai by Mr. Oskuli. And more importantly for Martha Root, her priceless address books with addresses she'd collected over 22 years. By February 1938, Almost every newspaper in India had published articles about the faith since Martha's arrival in September 1937. That's September, October, November, December, January, 5 months. So when she wrote a report on her teaching tour of India, Martha advised all Baha'i teachers, when possible, to carry a typewriter and make out good resumes of all lectures and give out to newspapers. When one speaks, one may speak to hundreds, but through the press, one can reach tens of thousands and sometimes hundreds of thousands. Martha was always extremely aware of the numbers wherever she was, and India had immense, immense numbers. It's a beautiful photograph of Isfandiar Bakhtiari, and she left Mumbai accompanied by Isfandiar, and they crossed India again and arrived in Santiniketan, staying at Rabindranath Tagore's Visva-Bharati University on the 13th and 14th of February, 1938. Martha was finally able, after 3 visits to India, to meet the Nobel Prize-winning poet and reformer who had influenced Gandhi. Rabindranath Tagore told Martha with great love and appreciation about Abdul Baha, whom he had met in Chicago in 1912, and told her the Baha'i faith was a great ideal. Martha lectured to the entire student body and professors of Visva-Bharati University. In early March 1938, Martha traveled 2,030 kilometers, 1,260 miles, across northern India to Surat on the west coast. In Surat, Martha stayed in the home of Narayanrao Vakil, the first Hindu to become a Baha'i. And this is Martha with Isfandiar Bakhtiari and Vakil and his family. Martha returned to Mumbai on March 15th and stayed for 1 month. She gave many lectures and radio broadcasts, and at the time, a 13-year-old Mehrangiz Munsif, who would later be a Knight of Baha'u'llah for the French Cameroons, assisted her during her stay. Now, it seems that this 13-year-old Mehrangiz Munsif might have been one of the only people who knew about Martha's cancer pains during her trip to India, because she helped soothe them with a hot water bottle. And this is a photograph of Martha participating in the play that was put on by the youth with Mehrangiz Munsif as a little angel above her. This is for the pageant organized for Nowruz on the 21st of March, 1938. Martha Root called the program remarkable. Martha traveled with Shireen back to her home in Ajmer and spent a week giving 2 talks and preparing a very important talk on the Baha'i faith and poverty. In Indore, Martha attended the All Faiths League convention. She read a message of greeting from the Guardian at the opening of the convention on April 18th, 1938, and the next day she gave probably her most important talk in India, What the Baha'i Faith Can Do for Poverty, which was very well received. But Martha was also very well prepared. She had made 7,000 copies of her talk ready to be given to journalists. And for 3 months, Indian papers wrote about that talk. Martha estimated her talk was published in 300,000 newspapers. This is one example of a newspaper in which it was published. Her talk, Miss Martha Root's speech at Indore Faith Congress. So they reprinted her talk, assuming that that's one of the 7 copies that Martha gave the press to print in papers. Then Martha traveled to what is today Pakistan, but was at the time still part of the British Raj. She arrived in Karachi on April 25th and spoke 8 times and attended 4 events that were organized in her honor. The National Assembly had prepared and arrived there to be there for Martha, and the National Convention was taking place. This is a picture of Martha in the center, a little bit to the left of the greatest name in this picture, with all the convention participants. And this is a photograph of Martha and the local spiritual assembly of Karachi, Pakistan. This is a photograph of Martha Root with Baha'is in Karachi, including children and a lovely baby. At the time, Martha was really a superstar going through India and Pakistan and Myanmar. And she was being courted by everyone, by the press, by Maharajas, by who's who in India. But Martha never, ever forgot that her mission was to spread the Baha'i teachings with infinite love and compassion. And this is my favorite story about Martha in India. One evening in Karachi, Martha got wind of a man who had desperately wanted to attend her talk, to hear her speak. But he fell ill extremely suddenly and had a very high temperature and was therefore unable to attend her lecture. And Martha left the post-lecture gathering and she went to the man who was so poor he lived behind the restaurant where he worked. The man's place was so small, it was only big enough for his mattress. But Martha sat alone with him by his side, took his hand, said a healing prayer. That to me is Martha Root. She'll speak to 4,000 people, but she will not forget the poor man who was too ill to come. And that is where her magic is. Martha met a very important man in India named Sadhu Vaswani, who she'd first met in 1930. He was a very well-known and very well-respected educator, and he was born in Hyderabad, Pakistan. So he arranged for Martha to travel to his hometown in Hyderabad, and he arranged for Martha to give 12 lectures there, and Sadhu Vaswani himself presided at most of Martha's lectures. Now, this is a very important chapter in Martha's life. Tahira the Pure, Iran's greatest woman. This is Martha in Ghazvin in 1930, and on the left is Tahira's house in Ghazvin. Martha stayed in Karachi for 3 months, from June to August 1938, to publish Tahira the Pure after 8 years of working on it since her visit to Ghazvin, Tahira's birthplace, in 1930. It was the only book Martha Root would ever write, and she finished it in Pakistan. She didn't just finish it in Pakistan, she published it in Pakistan. And thanks to the National Baha'i Archives of the United States, this is the last receipt from the civil and military press on the 16th of July, 1938, saying that full and final settlement of the bill for the publishing of Tahira the Pure. On 26th of July, 1938, Martha was writing a letter and explained the goal of her book as she was putting the finishing touches on it. My dream was to have the Bab, Baha'u'llah, Shohi Effendi, and Tahira go together in this book on a teaching tour around the whole world. A preacher preaches to a few hundred or thousands or tens of thousands, but a book can be a preacher for centuries and millions yet be born. Now, this is a real treat. I want to thank Farzam Hassian for this. Farzam Hassian is a collector of rare Baha'i books, and he had 2 of the first editions of Martha Root's printing of Tahira the Pure. So Martha Root published a red leather cover with gold lettering and a cheaper version in paperback in light blue. And both of these are from Farzam Hassian's collection. Now you can see on the bottom, I included the copyright 1938 by Martha Root, and it says it was published by Martha Root and printed by so-and-so. Martha sent out 1,000 copies all over the world and experienced confirmations immediately. On the evening of the 26th of July, 1938, a college student in Karachi told Martha, "I read the book yesterday and I could not sleep. I was thinking all night of the glory of Tahira's beautiful life." Just a few months later, Martha had heard back from 20 countries about her book. Shortly after its publication, Tahira the Pure translations in Japanese, Czech, Urdu, and Persian were already underway, and fan letters from around the world began arriving. In her introduction, Martha Root explains the historical relevance of Tahira's life for modern feminists, basically, and why she chose to write about her. It should be of thrilling interest to them, Western women, to know that the first women's rights martyr was not a Westerner at all, but a young woman poet, Tahirih, sometimes known as Quratul Ain of Ghazvin, Iran. And I want to just share, because it's the only book Martha ever wrote, I want to share my favorite excerpt, which is towards the beginning of the book. Demonstrates really Martha Root's grasp of the significance and power of inspiration that Tahir's life held. Picture in your mind one of the most beautiful young women in Iran, a genius, a poet, the most learned scholar of the Quran and the traditions. Think of her as the daughter of a jurist family of letters, daughter of the greatest high priest of her province, and very rich, enjoying high rank, living in an artistic palace, and distinguished among her young friends for her boundless, immeasurable courage. Picture what it must mean for a young woman like this, still in her 20s, to arise as the first woman disciple of a prophet. Then you will be able to understand this narrative. Martha Root published Tahirih the Pure, Iran's Greatest Woman, exactly 1 year before her passing. She was 66 when she published it. Pakistan. Leaving Karachi on August 4th, 1948, Martha made Baha'i history yet again. No foreign Baha'i travel teacher had ever toured what was then the northwestern frontier provinces of India, and the National Spiritual Assembly was very eager to have these cities opened to the faith. When Martha arrived in Lahore, Pakistan, she had 10,000 copies of an English pamphlet called The Universal Religion. It would be gone in a few weeks. That was the volume Martha was dealing with. Then in Srinagar, which is in now India, Martha was invited to speak at a birthday celebration for Krishna, which was attended by 4,000 people. And then she spoke to 4,000 people again on her last day over loudspeakers. Martha's work was just glorious and beautiful, but she was in the Himalayas and the altitude was very hard on her heart, and she was in intense physical pain. In Rawalpindi, the announcement for Martha's talk was printed 6 hours before the lecture and distributed through the streets with men beating on drums. Martha was deeply touched by a gesture from an elderly man in Rawalpindi. And this is her speaking. One old man at the lecture was so touched that Baha'u'llah had suffered so much to give his message to the world that he came to the railway station with a bed for one of us to rest on till the train would start at 4 in the morning. Martha gave lectures in Jammu, Sialkot, Gujranwala, and Lahore again. Then returned to India and attended the first Baha'i summer school in Shimla between September 19th and 30, 1938. And this is a photograph of Martha at the first Indian summer school. This is a story of firsts all throughout. Martha was suffering so much from the altitude that to make it easier for her, the summer school was moved to the Imperial Hotel, and the first 3 days of the summer school took place in her hotel room. Now is our last section for India, and this is Martha's tour of Indian universities. For 2 months between October 5th and December 5th, 1938, Martha spoke at 31 universities. Jal Singh College, in what is today Pakistan, in Lahore. Also in Lahore, New Sikh National College and SD College. And then now the rest of the Indian universities are in India. This is Khalsa College in Amritsar. This is a hotel bill for Martha in Amritsar while she was doing her tour of universities there. She spoke at Hindu Sabha College and was very, very happy because 50 female students were present, the highest number of girls so far. Then Dhyanan Anglo-Vedic College in Jalandhar, Ludhiana Government College in Ludhiana, Mohindra College in Patiala, Hindu College in Delhi. She spoke to 5 colleges in Delhi, Indraprastha Girls College, Delhi University, Ramjas College, the Anglo-Arabic College in Delhi. Then Martha went to Aligarh and spoke to Muslim Girls College and Aligarh University. And finally, on October 26, 1938, a lifelong dream, Martha was able to visit the Taj Mahal. Our first visit to the Taj Mahal, the building which I had been waiting all my life to see. I think the Baha'i Temple in Chicago and the Taj Mahal are the 2 most beautiful buildings I have ever looked upon. But our Baha'i Temple is the more beautiful of the 2. The Baha'i Temple is filled with the Holy Spirit. One can feel the living presence of the infinite, unknowable God in that majestic house of worship. Martha resumed her tour of the Indian universities with Radhaswami Educational Institute in Agra, and also in Agra just this college, Dialbag Colony Girls College. Martha moved on to 2 universities in Lucknow University. Now, Lucknow, where the 9th letter of the living was originally from, who we lost track of. We don't know what happened to him. And Isabella Thornburg College for Girls. In Kanpur, Martha spoke to SD College of Commerce and Balika Vidyala Intermediate College for Girls and Allahabad University and what is today Pragyaraj. Women's College in Varanasi, which used to be called Benares, and also Queen's Government Technical Intermediate College for Boys, and the Hindu College, and the Theosophical National Boys College, all in Varanasi. In Patna University, Martha gave a lecture, and at the end of her lecture, a professor spoke. Now, I want to say that if I had really gone into detail about these tour of universities, it would have taken me at least a full session. So many things happened. People rushed for literature, were very upset when there were no pamphlets, asked Martha to send them more pamphlets. At almost every lecture, eminent professors spoke about the faith. But because I couldn't include them everywhere, I chose my favorite testimony about the faith and included it here at Patna University. At the end of her lecture at Patna University, Professor Gyan Chand spoke. In these times without cheer, this lecture on world order and world peace comes as an inspiring message. The more we have of the Baha'i faith, the better. These principles are truths of fundamental importance. The students of economics are not used to having things put in the way they have been today. This is a new strain in economics, but it is bearing on economic problems is profound and far-reaching. If we could put these principles into practice, namely that there should be work for all, and all should work, and there should be a living wage for all, we should have a different and a better world to live in. Martha Root inspired academics throughout her tour. People would speak in words as lofty as these over and over again at almost every university she spoke at. Also in Patna, Martha spoke at Bihar National College, then ended her tour of India in Kolkata with the Indian Research Institute, the University of Kolkata, and City College. Leaving India. Martha stayed in Kolkata for a month from 17th of November to the 14th of December, 1938. This is a photograph of Martha with the Baha'is of Kolkata. Martha left Kolkata and crossed India again. This might be the 5th time she crosses India. She arrived in Mumbai towards the middle of December and spent the last 2 weeks lecturing in Mumbai and saying goodbye. This is a photograph of Martha with the Baha'is of Mumbai. This is a close-up in a photo that I don't have of the Baha'is of Mumbai. I think this is my favorite portrait of Martha in India. This is also a photograph of Martha and the National Spiritual Assembly of India and Burma at the local Spiritual Assembly of Bombay on 29th of December 1938, on the same day that Martha sailed away. Throughout her tour, Martha had visited 39 cities in India, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, and Myanmar. She toured 31 universities, published her one and only book, lectured hundreds of times to thousands of people. Everywhere she went, Martha had met with leaders in education, visited libraries, met with the press, and published hundreds of articles. This is a photograph of Martha with the Baha'is of Mumbai at her farewell on December 27th, 1938. And during the farewell dinner, the day this photograph was taken, Martha told the Baha'is of Mumbai, "I know of no other country where I would have wished so much to work during these months to promote these blessed teachings as here in India, mystic India, trained for so many centuries in high cultural religions. India has been preparing for 6,000 years to understand well this message of Baha'u'llah in this day, for a new world state, for universal religion, for cosmic consciousness, and for the oneness of mankind. India is so sensitive to the call of the spirit. She has the habit to put eternal values high." Martha's tour of India had been nothing short of heroic, a true feat of endurance and resilience and passion. The pace had been so intense and demanding that no one but Martha Root could have done it. And she had done it with terminal stage breast cancer. Martha had never complained, but she had started to weaken. In a very telling letter to her dear friend Lucy Wilson, Martha wrote with her characteristic humility, "I am just the same Martha, only life gets too much for me." The Guardian's message. On January 25th, 1939, as Martha was setting foot in Australia, Shoghi Effendi wrote an extraordinary letter about Martha Root's teaching feat in India to the National Assembly in quite firm language, I may add. "The essential now the Guardian feels is for each one of the friends, and particularly the local assemblies, to arise and with unflinching resolve to endeavor to follow up the splendid work she has so ably yet so unostentatiously accomplished. They would be certainly failing in their debt of gratitude to her if they allow the seeds she had faithfully and painstakingly scattered during these months of arduous and uninterrupted effort to get lost. Rather, they should spare no effort to water these seeds and enable them to germinate and yield in due time the most abundant and lasting results." Shoghi Effendi also wrote to Martha Root. Martha had been sending reports to The Guardian on October 6th, December 16th, December 19th, and The Guardian replied on the same day, January 25th, 1939, and informed Martha that her final report had been translated into Persian and shared with the Baha'is in Iran. Here are a few excerpts from The Guardian's letter to Martha Root. "What you have accomplished is all the more remarkable and indeed miraculous, considering your poor health and the hardships and other trying circumstances attending your journey." I'm assuming he's talking about the bombing and the earthquake. "The Indian believers are all unanimous in expressing their gratitude and their feeling of unbounded admiration for the services you have rendered in their midst." The Guardian added a handwritten postscript, my favorite. Dearest Martha, India is astir with praise and admiration for you. What you have achieved in that land is truly historic and marvelous. Chapter 4, Australia. Sailing to Australia. 15 months after her arrival in India, Martha sailed out of Mumbai Harbor on 29th of December 1938 aboard the Strathard, which you can see here on this slide, for Australia. Martha had celebrated her 65th birthday in Shanghai shortly before the bombing. She turned 66 during the monsoons in northern India. She was planning on spending her 67th birthday in the United States, but fate had other plans. By January 1939, Martha had 8 months less to live, and she was in extreme and constant pain, something only the ship's attendants who had access to her room knew. The pains in her bones and her back had become so violent that Martha could not bend down to open her suitcase and had to work standing up. Martha was in such tremendous pain that when the Strathard docked in Sri Lanka, she did not go ashore to meet the reporters. They met her aboard the ship instead. This was extremely unlike Martha Root. Perth and Adelaide. This is Martha's name on the ship manifest for the Strathard. She's passenger number 41. Martha disembarked in Perth on January 10th, 1939, on the west coast of Australia, 9,000 kilometers, 5,600 miles southeast of India, where she had just spent 15 months. January was thankfully summer in the Southern Hemisphere, and Martha was welcomed by telegrams from all over Australia. Martha gave 2 talks a day in Perth and did 2 radio interviews and began a little tradition of giving teas for the press and broadcast editors, which she would do with the help of Baha'is in every city after Perth. I think this is really important because this is a new innovation that Martha comes up with in Australia 8 months before she dies. And she is suffering. Her whole body is hurting her. She's really suffering with cancer. And she is still thinking about how to teach the faith more effectively. And she thinks, oh, I know what I can do. I can do teas for the press. That'll be very efficient. So it shows that she was constantly innovating in her teaching all the way up until the very end. This is a photograph of Martha aboard the Stratheden ship, leaving Perth on January 24th, 1939, with the Perth Baha'is, and standing behind her, Mr. and Mrs. Cox, Mrs. Miller, and Mrs. Johnson, and 2 cute boys sitting down on the floor. When Martha arrived in Adelaide on this January 28th, 1939, she was in terrible health. She gave 1 or 2 lectures, and the rest of her engagements were canceled, and she was forced to rest. Dr. Stanley Bolton, a Baha'i chiropractor in Sydney, made the trip to Adelaide at his own cost with his portable X-ray machines and medical exam table. And he was a very skilled doctor, and he managed to relieve some of Martha's pain, of course, temporarily. This is a photograph of Dr. Bolton on the left with Martha in the center in Sydney. Martha understood intellectually that it was important for her to consult Dr. Bolton, but she wrote in a letter that her fear of doctors is just so powerful. It's almost like a phobia. This is what she says in her letter to a friend. I am terribly afraid of doctors. Truly, I am terribly afraid. They almost always stop all my work. As soon as Martha felt better, temporarily better, a deluge of publicity in newspapers reached 500,000 subscribers in Australia. These are all advertisements of Martha's talks in Australia. And these are some of the articles that were published about her visit. Martha gave a phenomenal interview on Adelaide's largest radio station about Tahrir Iran's greatest woman. And the director of the radio station was ecstatic. He said, it is a perfect broadcast. And actually, Martha was very happy with the talk. She wrote to her friends saying, perhaps I could write a better one. But this is thrilling, gripping. It moves me until it seems to be Tahereh speaking her own self to the modern world. Really, even though her body is, for lack of a better word, disintegrating beneath Martha, her work is now the best it has ever been because she has been doing this for 22 years. So she is at the top of her game in terms of radio talks, interviews, lectures in front of people. She is the best she's ever been. Tasmania and Melbourne. These are all articles that were published in Tasmania. I just chose for this collage, I just chose the titles. In Tasmania, a lot of interest was generated for the faith. There was only one Baha'i living in Tasmania, Greta Lamprell, this magnificent woman that you see here. She was the first Tasmanian Baha'i. She was the secretary of the National Spiritual Assembly of Australia and New Zealand, and she later would become a Knight of Baha'u'llah. It's a beautiful picture of Tasmania. There had never been more Baha'is on the soil of Tasmania than at the time of Martha's visit in February 1939. Martha spoke 14 times, spoke several times on the radio, spoke in Hobart and in Launceston, then returned to Melbourne in early February 1939 and gave 40 lectures in 4 weeks. Then went on to Sydney, where she arrived on the 12th of March and gave 14 lectures, and everyone was panicking. Dr. Bolton and other Baha'is tried unsuccessfully to get Martha to slow down or change course. And then, while she was in Sydney, Martha suffered a mild heart attack. She had a heart attack in Sydney. A heart attack. And the way that she chose to recover from her heart attack was to sail to Auckland and rest in her cabin for 4 days, just leaving for lunch. And then Martha wrote to her friends and said, quote unquote, I overdid it in Sydney. She had a heart attack. And then she added, it was wonderful, but I cannot do so much anymore. She had a heart attack. Chapter 5, New Zealand. Auckland. This is a photograph of Martha and the Baha'is of New Zealand in 1939. The Baha'is of Auckland met her at the pier on April 26, 1939. And Martha, of course, as she was recovering from her heart attack, she had prepared notes for the journalists. This is a photograph of Martha with members of the National Spiritual Assembly of Australia and New Zealand. The Baha'is took Martha to the Stonehurst Hotel. This is a lovely vintage flyer for the hotel, showing views from the roof, etc. Martha had a very charming room on the ground floor that had a fireplace. The weather was a little cold. Martha went straight to bed and spent the first day greeting callers while she rested. She loved that she could see the garden right outside her window. This is another vintage flyer for the Stonehurst. But one of the things that happened in Auckland that was very, very cute was the staff of the Stonehurst Hotel fell in love with Martha. One of the Auckland Baha'is said, the management and staff soon fell in love with our Martha. They waited on her with evident pleasure. When we went to settle up when Martha left, we were told no extras were charged for meals and service in room because she was ill and needed it, and it was so sweet. So I tell you, Martha, from the very beginning, was always so adorable. It was The guardians said that she had a saintliness about her, and that saintliness had to do with purity of spirit. And Martha had that from the moment she was born to the moment that she died. The Baha'is in New Zealand arranged a full schedule for Martha's 1 month visit. Need I remind you, this is after her heart attack, just so we don't forget that. So she arrived on the 27th of April. Her big program started on the 28th. Martha gave 2 lectures a day at universities, clubs, leagues, churches, peace movements, and societies. Most of Martha's public lectures in Auckland were followed by questions and answers, and tea was served at nearly all the events. This is just lovely. Martha tells a very, very funny story about one of her talks in Auckland at the Rationalist Society. Now, just FYI, the Rationalist Society were people who were pretty much against all religion. So I have no idea why Martha spoke there, but I love her. So this is what she says. I came out very strong for religion. And then the first 5 minutes, the top gallery shouted, "No, no." And then the main floor applauded, "Yes, yes." Martha's visit to New Zealand was well covered in local newspapers, as you can see here. But Martha knew her body was growing weaker, and so she worked as hard as she could. And a very observant New Zealand Baha'i described Martha 5 months before her passing. Only the strong faith of her soul and spirit kept her going. The veil of her body had worn so thin, she appeared all spirit. The veil of her body had worn so thin, she appeared all spirit. Memories of Martha Root. I've spoken a lot about Martha's relationship to prayer, and this is really special. All these images here, except for the last one, are all from Dwayne Troxell, who is an early pioneer in illustrating Martha's life through presentations and a real inspiration for me personally. And he worked with the National Baha'i Archives of the United States and photographed a lot of relics belonging to Martha Root. And these are Martha Root's prayer beads that were given to her by the Greatest Holy Leaf. This is an absolutely exquisite brooch of Martha Root's. This is her Baha'i ring with the greatest name. This is her trusty Corona brand typewriter. And again, I want to thank Farzam Hassian, our friend who's a collector of rare books. This is a very beautiful book. It's absolutely stunning early edition of Baha'u'llah and the New Era. It's a leather binding with beautiful floral golden decorations. The inside is what is it called? It's marbled paper on the front. But why this is special is because I've spoken at least 100 times about Martha giving books to libraries, but this is actually a book she gave to a library, and the book is inscribed, "Presented to the Library of the University of Oregon with greetings from Martha L. Root, February 18th, 1931. So I feel so privileged to be able to see a book donated by Martha Root. And I really thank Farzam Hassian for making this possible. This is just a dream for me. Last ship. Martha sailed out of Auckland on the Mariposa on the 29th of May, 1939. She was going home to America to help prosecute the Guardian's first 7-year plan, the very first great teaching plan of the formative age of the faith, which had been inaugurated in 1937 and would end in 1944. This is another picture of the Mariposa. A Baha'i nurse went aboard the Mariposa to help Martha undress and said, "I had to lift her into her berth. She was so exhausted." As the Mariposa sailed into the night, heading north, Martha Root was beginning the last ship journey of her life. Martha's health was growing steadily worse, especially the searing pain in her leg, back, and neck. Fiji. Martha sailed out of Auckland on the Mariposa on the 29th of May, 1939, When the ship reached Suva, Fiji, Martha seized the once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. She wrote, "I put on the red dress and coat and hat, and had the steward help me upstairs. Martha spoke with a, these are all pictures of Fiji. Martha spoke with a customs official and gave him some literature. Relatives of Martha's friends met her at the dock with a car, so Martha was able to go into Suva to visit a newspaper editor, a library, and a school. Martha wrote to the friends in New Zealand about her visit to Suva. It was so lovely. Oh, but I had to hold my neck with both hands, and twice I got out of the car, my leg hurt so. Back on the Mariposa, nothing could alleviate Martha's immense physical pain. It surrounded her, it encompassed her, and all she could do was pray to work just a little more for Baha'u'llah. With her very last teaching act ever, Martha was the first to bring the Baha'i faith to Fiji. Chapter 6, Hawaii. Martha's arrival in Honolulu. These photographs of the ship arriving in Honolulu are artificial intelligence. Apologies, I couldn't find anything else. A crowd of friends met Martha on the pier that morning of June 7th, 1939, as the Mariposa docked at Honolulu. They waited and waited and waited. Martha didn't appear. The Baha'is started to get worried. Something was wrong. A Baha'i woman went aboard the ship and helped Martha disembark. An hour and a half after the Mariposa had docked, Martha emerged. Now, this is not a picture of Martha in Hawaii. This is a photograph I've always wanted to use, but there is no date and no information, so I never was able to use it. So I'm sharing it with you now because it's a rare photograph. Thank you to the National Baha'i Archives of the United States. By the time Martha emerged from the Mariposa, she could barely walk by herself, so two Baha'is helped her to the waiting car. Henriette Fromm wrote to Martha's family, "We drove home as carefully as possible. I tried to support her shoulders to minimize any jar from the least move, especially if her head and neck caused great agony. We got her to bed as quickly as possible and tried to make her comfortable. But she was in such agony and so helpless that she could not even hold a glass of water. Agonizing pain. Martha decided not to go back to the ship. She asked for some of her luggage to be brought ashore. The rest would be picked up in San Francisco by Lucy Marshall. Martha was moved into the Baldwin's home. This is a photograph of the Baldwin's home where Martha Root passed away, courtesy of Dwayne Troxell. Catherine Baldwin, the home in whose home Martha was a relative by marriage of Agnes Alexander. Henriette Fromm on the left and Uti Muther on the right cared through the night for Martha. She had a high temperature and she reluctantly agreed to see a doctor, but refused to be transferred to the hospital. Martha listened to Henriette and Uti, who had prescribed her absolute rest and quiet, and she let them treat her with baking lights and electric pads and Epsom salts and pain-relieving balm. Martha's letter. On June 9th, 1939, 2 days after her arrival in Honolulu, Martha felt well enough to dictate a thoroughly heartbreaking letter to Roy Wilhelm, her spiritual father and close friend of 31 years. Was so very ill on the ship, especially the last day. I screamed with the pain in my neck, terribly inflamed muscles. I thought I would pass. I came to these friends and everything is being done for me. The first night they sent for their doctor. I was in such pain, it was hard to swallow. I could not lift my head. I have suffered, but I am quite a little better. I can swallow. The nausea is gone. My leg that had hurt me every day, sciatica or something, is better. My neck is a little better, but oh, it hurts me so. On June 23rd, 1939, Catherine Baldwin sent a cable to Roy Wilhelm. Martha, exhausted, condition not serious, but requires rest in bed several weeks. She is in hands excellent doctor and having every comfort we can possibly give. Already she has improved. We feel blessed having her in our home. Even confined to bed and in unbelievable pain, in what seems like every single part of her body, down to even the very act of swallowing, Martha was planning to fulfill Shoghi Effendi's wishes and travel to California, Oregon, New Orleans, and South America. Chapter 7, Cancer. The Good Doctors. As time went on, Henrietta Fromm realized Martha's condition was extremely serious, and it felt important that she see a doctor. Martha agreed to be seen by a doctor, but on one condition, that she not be involved. She asked that any communication regarding illness or medication take place between the physician and Henrietta Fromm or Catherine Baldwin. Dr. Niels Larsen on the left, director of Queen's Hospital, was the Baldwin's family doctor, but he was absent when they needed to consult with a doctor. So they consulted with his associate doctor, Alfred Molyneux. Dr. Larsen signed all of the reports. With great tact and patience, Dr. Molyneux of Queen's Hospital won Martha's trust. A few days later, Dr. Molyneux had x-rays taken. The results were horrific. They showed the devastation caused by 27 years of cancer spreading, affecting Martha's mobility, causing bone loss and bone lesions, which had been the source of Martha's excruciating neck and back pain for years. There was no treatment. The only thing the doctors could do now was reduce pain. Dr. Larsen prescribed morphine injections, starting with very small doses to soothe Martha's pain. By this point, Martha needed 2 full-time nurses, and Henrietta and Uti cared for her with immense love and compassion. Weeks later, Henrietta wrote, "During all this time, Martha has never once referred to the real nature of her illness. It is as if she could not bear to mention it. But from veiled remarks, I feel that subconsciously she has feared and dreaded this since 1912. Martha's last months. The climate in Honolulu, at least, was perfect, and Martha's view from her bed was the Baldwin's green lawns dotted with flowering shrubs and avocado and mango trees, a sight she loved. The Spiritual Assembly of Honolulu regularly sent fresh flowers for Martha's room. As the weeks progressed, Martha's health worsened considerably. A 3rd nurse was added for Martha to have 24-hour care. Martha was delirious and often lost consciousness, but she never lost her sense of responsibility or her fierce financial independence. She insisted on paying all her medical expenses herself with money she had on her, $500 worth of uncashed checks from many countries, $11,500 today, and wire transfers from her bank accounts in the United States. During the last few months of her life, Martha had the presence of mind to dictate her will, specifying how her books, clothes, and possessions should be distributed. No one back home knew how serious Martha's condition was. Thrilling and joyful announcements of her imminent return were published in the Baha'i News in June, where she first arrived in Hawaii. This is the advertisement, the announcement here on this page. And in August 1939, a few weeks before her passing, another joyful announcement: Miss Martha Root returns from the East. Martha Root's 67th birthday. On August 10th, 1939, Martha celebrated her 67th birthday. Someone had baked Martha Root a cake which she couldn't eat, but she did enjoy blowing out the 9 lighted candles. Letters, cables, flowers, and gifts arrived from many parts of the world, and messages were read to Martha a few at a time over the following days. In honor of Martha Root's birthday, the Spiritual Assembly of Honolulu gave her probably her favorite gift and did something that Martha had done countless times in her life. Just probably the best gift you could ever give Martha Root. They gave books in her name into local libraries. Prayer. As the weeks passed, Martha drifted in and out of consciousness. The name of Shohi Effendi was a constant whisper on her lips. Henrietta Fromm noticed that Martha's spirit was unbreakable. In her waking hours, as well as in her dreams, Martha continues her teaching mission. Sometimes it is an individual she is addressing, and again, it is an audience. Martha always seemed taken by surprise when she drifted from the spiritual worlds back to the waking world. She was surrounded by a spiritual energy and in a constant state of prayer, begging Baha'u'llah to hold her hand, to give her strength, to help her endure. One specific prayer held great meaning for Martha, and Henrietta, with her hand on Martha's forehead, read it to her frequently. It begins with the words, "From the sweet scented streams of thine eternity, give me to drink, O my God. And of the fruits of the tree of thy being, enable me to taste, O my hope." Chapter 8, The Passing of Martha Root. Martha's last letter. While life was ebbing away, it became increasingly difficult for Martha to communicate. In early September 1939, a few weeks before her death, Martha wrote her last letter to her family, friends, and to the National Spiritual Assembly. A beautiful letter filled with her love. I'm going to read you an excerpt. I am so near the shores of eternity. I thank you, each and every one, for all that you will do to help me, and I thank you for your love. I do not speak so late tonight of the glorious side of life after death. I say to you, beloved of my heart, I am glad to go through this terrible agony, for if it came, it must have come for a purpose to each one of us. If your love for each other has deepened, if this servant has been able to witness for her Lord, if the ties between India, Australia, New Zealand, and the Hawaiian Islands are strengthened, then I have not come in vain. Everything has been successful. Such are our lives. The day she wrote her last letter home, Martha received a cable from Shogi Effendi. Grieve illness, fervently, lovingly praying, Shogi. Martha was thrilled. On 22nd September 1939, 6 days before Martha's passing, Catherine Baldwin sent the following telegram to Frank Root, Martha Root's nephew, the son of her older brother Clarence, who had died 4 years before. Frank Root, 556 South Main Springs, Cambridge Springs, Pennsylvania. Martha wishes interment Honolulu. She sends love to all family. Stop. Letter follows. 28th of September 1939. These words belong to Martha Root's brilliant biographer, Mabel Garris. Surrounded by cheerfulness and love, with Catherine Baldwin and Harriet Fromm at her bedside, Martha closed her eyes, a beatific smile on her face. In the quiet afternoon of 28 September 1939, she slipped into unconsciousness and moved from this world. It was a gentle, peaceful leave-taking. The next day before Martha Root's funeral, Shoghi Effendi cabled, "Sorrowful, dearest Martha's passing. Rejoice her Assumption seat, supreme concourse, profoundly grateful your tender care." Martha was laid to rest in beautiful Oahu Cemetery, a peaceful, gorgeous cemetery in Honolulu at 4:30 p.m. on 29th of September 1939, the day after she passed away. Martha's last act had been to wire money from her accounts to cover the cost of her own funeral. Sorry, that's just so sad. So heroic. This is actually a photograph from the National Baha'i Archives of Martha Root's grave on the day that she was buried. It was shared with me by Dwayne Troxel. Immediately after Martha's funeral, the Baha'is of Hawaii began building the tombstone that you see here, which Shoghi Effendi had directed should be placed on her grave. This is a Google Earth satellite image of Martha Root's grave. As you can see, it lies in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, an ocean she had crossed 4 times. And this is a close-up of Martha Root's tombstone. The inscription on it from the writings of Baha'u'llah describe Martha's entire life. "Unloose your tongues and proclaim unceasingly his cause." Now, this next story is a contribution by Della Marcus, author of Her Eternal Crown. In 1956, a Baha'i from Honolulu went on pilgrimage to Haifa. And this is an excerpt of what Shoghi Effendi told her about the significance of Martha Root's resting place. "The holiest spot in the Pacific Ocean is the grave of Martha Root. The supreme concourse is suspended above that grave, waiting to rush to the assistance of any suppliant." Chapter 9, Immortality. On October 2nd, 1939, 4 days after Martha Root's passing, The Guardian sent a message to the Baha'i world about his most beloved and tireless collaborator in the teaching field, elevating her to the rank of hand of the cause. "Martha's unnumbered admirers throughout Baha'i world lament with me earthly extinction, her heroic life. Concourse on high acclaim her elevation, rightful position, galaxy Baha'i immortals. Posterity will establish her as foremost hand, which Abdu'l-Baha's will has raised up first Baha'i century. Present generation, her fellow believers, recognize her first, finest fruit, formative age faith Baha'u'llah has as yet produced. Advised, hold befitting memorial gathering, temple, honor one whose acts shed imperishable luster, American Baha'i community. Impelled share with National Assembly, expenses erection monument symbolic spot meeting place east-west to both which she unsparingly dedicated full force, mighty energies. The many titles of Martha Root. I truly hope that this section shows how unique and unparalleled Martha Root was in the history of the faith. In tablets revealed in her honor, Abdu'l-Baha called Martha Root harbinger of the covenant and herald of the kingdom. I want to revisit the three titles we've already just seen in the message of the Guardian, dated the 2nd of October, 1939. First, Shoghi Effendi says that she has been elevated to her rightful position in the galaxy of Baha'i immortals. Then, he bestows on her the rank as foremost hand, which Abdu'l-Baha's will has raised in first Baha'i century. And finally, he calls her first finest fruit formative age faith Baha'u'llah has yet produced. In a letter dated October 20th, so 18 days later, addressed to Roy Wilhelm, her spiritual father and treasurer of the National Assembly, Shoghi Effendi speaks of the significance of Martha Root's passing. And listen to this. Her departure constitute the heaviest blow which the teaching force, not only in America, but throughout the entire Baha'i world, has sustained since the passing of our beloved master. In God Passes By, the record of the achievements of the first 100 years of the Baha'i faith, Shoghi Effendi mentions Martha Root by name 16 times. These are the 16 times she's mentioned. The only other people mentioned 16 and above times in God Passes By are the heroes, heroines, and martyrs of the Babi dispensation. In the third section of the last chapter of God Passes By, chapter 25, International Expansion of Teaching Activities, Martha has an entire section, and she's the only Westerner mentioned, other than Queen Marie. Worldwide Teaching Activities of Martha Root is an entire subsection of chapter 25. And this is what Shoghi Effendi begins by calling Martha in God Passes By. That star servant of Baha'u'llah, the indomitable and immortal Martha Root, makes an astounding statement. She has covered herself with a glory that has not only eclipsed the achievements of the teachers of the faith among her contemporaries the globe around, but has outshone the feats accomplished by any of its propagators in the course of an entire century. Shoghi Effendi calls Martha Root the archetype of Baha'i itinerant teachers, the foremost hand raised by Baha'u'llah since Abdu'l-Baha's passing. This is a capitally important statement. The Guardian is saying in no uncertain terms that Martha Root was raised by Baha'u'llah himself. Shoghi Effendi calls Martha Root leading ambassadress of his faith, pride of Baha'i teachers, whether men or women in both the East and the West. He inscribes her in the annals of Baha'i history forever by naming her in God Passes By the first to arise in the very year the tablets of the divine plan were unveiled in the United States of America in response to the epoch-making summons voiced in them by Baha'u'llah. Shoghi Effendi then, for several pages, lists every single thing, every accomplishment, every person Martha Root has met, every university, every society she has collaborated with, and then says, it is a record that constitutes the nearest approach to the example set by Abdul Baha himself to his disciples in the course of his journeys through the West. The Guardian, in God Passes By, has compared Martha Root's 22 years of teaching to the nearest example of Abdul Baha's journeys to the West. And he ends his tribute in God Passes By calling Martha's entire life the fairest fruit as yet yielded by the formative age of the dispensation of Baha'u'llah. Hand of the Cause. I want to end this series on Martha Root's extraordinary, unparalleled life with her own awestruck words about the station, the rank of Hand of the Cause in a letter she wrote to her closest friend, Lucy Wilson. In these humble words, Martha Root clearly indicates that she in no way considered herself anywhere near this category. And these words were written by the one destined by Baha'u'llah to become the foremost hand of the cause of God. This is Martha Root writing to Lucy Wilson. We can't all be called to be hands of the cause. But we can all dedicate ourselves as if we were. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. Thank you to the Baha'is of Clearwater for providing this space. It has been an honor to share with you the life of the immortal Martha Root over the last 8 weeks.